All right. Welcome to Triple Break. This is a podcast on Dissidia, Final Fantasy, Opera Omnia, JP. I really need to find a way to shorten that. I don't want to talk. I don't want to speak this every time. Anyways, so this time we are gonna talk about tanks. Yeah, tanks. So, how do you guys feel about tanks?
There aren't any big armored daddies there.
They really aren't, right? It's actually surprising you guys expect some of them to actually have tanking capabilities.
It's pretty funny. My uh, favorite tank happens to be someone in an 80s Leo.
Okay.
Someone dubbed it Hot Mama Pants.
All right. But the reason why we are talking about tanks is because right now, tanks are kind of a big deal. So we should probably just bring up who do we define as tanks. So this is a very loose definition. I think it's more of we fit the definition around these some characters rather than make the definition first, then chose these some characters. But hey, these are the characters we want to talk about. They all have their EX pluses right now. So the definitions, as we decided, they need to be able to reliably mitigate incoming brave and or HP damage, and they need to somehow manipulate the enemy targeting. So your random DPS doesn't get instant gimped to death. So under these definitions, you might notice someone say, why isn't Prompto there? Or another big one's, why isn't Leon there? In Leon's case, well, first, for just the purpose of this podcast, we're just gonna categorize them as off tanks. In Leon's case, he's a little bit niche. We're going to talk about him maybe later. In Prompto's case, he only has 5 uses of taunt and dodge for himself, and because Edge's EX actually gives him a party evasion buff, so he's more reliable in that sense. We're going to talk about it later. Also, and for Kamari, he doesn't really have a taunt, so yeah. Anyways, I've talked for long enough. So Marco take over. What are we gonna talk about this time?
Okay, sure. So I think for me, I think of a character as a tank is like when I bring this character to the fight. My main aim of having this character in the team is to help the team take less damage, or sometimes to like save a teammate from dying. So, which is why I think these 7 characters listed here are the best representatives of a tank. Like in the case of Prompto, while he does have taunt, but you are not really using him in your team for the taunting. I think if you bring Prompto, you are more like bringing him for his aura or bringing him for the damage he's doing. And I guess we can just move on to talking about individual tanks. And I'll try to start since I actually have used most of the tanks here. So I have
I
6 of
think
them.
the only one you don't have is Snow, right?
Yes, I
Yeah,
have the 6 of them except Snow, and I have MLB all of them except Warrior of
I
Light.
don't think any of us actually maxed Word of Light.
Yeah, so I think Warrior of Light was actually like extremely helpful in early Cosmos as well as early Chaos. So I started JP when Cosmos started, when like the level 70 Awakening hit, and Warrior Light was like the first EX weapon I put. So I used him for almost like everything, and he definitely made life a lot easier. Because I think at that time for Cosmos content, Warrior of Light's shield is quite strong. It's pretty hard to have it broken by the enemy, and a lot of the time he just makes the fight like brain dead. You don't have to worry about what the enemy is doing. You can just feel free to attack and feel free to dump your brave, and there's almost like no consequences.
And on top of that, he also brings 40% attack and Brave Aura, so you have that, and you can just freely attack and basically neutrals everything.
Bonus points if you have eye brave buffers. so that can get pretty intense with batteries, and since Warrior of Light also has a party-wide battery recharge.
Yes, War of Light's battery is actually pretty interesting. His skill one, it's actually eye brave based battery based on the teammates eye brave first, then it doubles their brave second. I think that's the only battery that does that, right? Aside from like things like say crowd sphere.
Yeah, I think he's the only one who does that.
But anyways, I'll be on topic for a little bit. So here we actually compiled some basic stuff for all the 7 tanks that we're gonna talk about. So basic information like how they taunt, if they have healing, how much they heal for. Most tanks actually have auras, actually, quite surprisingly. And so I have listed their aura numbers out there. And there's also some subjective remarks from us. So these are subjective remarks, and they're not supposed to be taken as facts. They're basically our opinions that are taken. They're just basically, yeah, opinions and from our usage of the characters. And of course, most things listed here are based off of stats from MLB EX Plus. So keep that in mind. We are mostly going to talk about Chaos content, despite the first intro being War of Light, who shine most in Cosmos than early Chaos. But we're going to focus our discussion on Chaos mostly. And as for the things that we are actually going to talk about, so the things are like, why are tanks good? Why do we even bring a tank? Like, do you actually need tanks? And everything, and the stuff like that. You can read back up if you want. But anyways, let's keep going.
Sure. So I think we sort of need to make a disclaimer about the MLB statement, since none of us has MLB Warrior of Light, and his damage at base EX or like EX plus 0 LB is sort of bad for chaos content, and which is why we are not using him that much. But for people who has purpled him or even given him spheres, they might still be using him. So I think our remarks for on him his damage or longevity might sort of be biased due to the fact none of us invested in getting to him.
And the other thing is, because we stopped using Word of Light because his damage was low. But at around that time, I think it was around what's it Machina LC, where I mean not LC, Machina Sieben, where we kind of stopped using him, right? Um, that's because like we still don't have a lot of like great attackers that can compensate for his low damage. So later on, actually, I think right now, if you have maxed Word of Light with another great attacker, let's say like Jack or Shadow, or just like name anyone from the top list, I think he can be used pretty reliably still. The one thing is that he doesn't have a last stand. So last stand is basically if you're above 50% HP, you can get KO'd. He's the only tank on this list that can die, so keep that in mind.
I think personally, I use Warrior of Light mostly just for the AoE shield. So for fights where the enemy has a lot of AoE attacks and it can get nasty, I would bring Warrior of Light.
So a recent
The last
example.
time,
Okay, yeah, go ahead.
I think the last time I used him was actually in Brothers Chaos, but that's like pre Galof's EX plus weapons since Galof
Yeah.
just destroyed Brothers. But at that time, it was pretty hard because they do their AoE attack like every 3 turns or something.
Yeah. I think I also use Word of Light in Brothers Chaos as well. It's actually easier there because in the summon ultimate stages, you actually everyone gets synergy, so the lack of stats isn't that much an issue over there. The last time I think he was used for outside synergy that I considered bringing him first. I think that was actually Sync's Chaos because the first round there is the Merilith. Remind us what Merilith does.
They nuke your party in style.
Pretty much. Upon death, or just upon like their AoE, like target all, they just like rain swords on you, and then you basically take like 40k damage and die. Unless you have Word of Light, which basically takes down that to like 3k distributed. So yeah, that's Word of Light.
Actually, yeah, actually, you mentioned the Marilus. There's another thing we all forgot about Warrior of Light is that he gets a debuff evasion on his 35 CP, I
Yeah,
think.
skill 2.
Yeah, so sometimes when he taunts the enemy, he would be able to avoid the debuff, which is pretty nice.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame though that they didn't extend the duration of that. It was only 3 turns, I believe. So it gets a little bit rough depending on how you pace out his skill uses. But speaking of skill uses, he has 10 plus 6, so that's a pretty nice amount, and his HP plus plus is actually very good to fill in the gaps. It has a battery and a small overflow on top of it, so as long as your shield doesn't get broken too bad, he should be able to keep up. Anyways, moving on to the next one. Celes,
So
who used her a lot here?
so Celeste is totally awesome. And initially for her X when she was released like a year and a half ago, even 2 years, I can't count. She was considered hugely as a niche tank, and a lot of people pretty much ignored her for whichever reason. Mostly because at that time tanks weren't really needed, which is going to be a fun topic to talk about later, especially considering uh, the current chaos at the moment. But anyways, so pretty much how Celeste works is that she uses Runic to absorb magic and absorb the magic as Brave, and she is able to pretty much be kind of a damage jailer at the same time, more offensively rather than defensively, if that makes um how she is now. She's pretty much able to Brave heal like around 20% of her damage, which with her X Shining Edge, and then with her Spinning Edge, and then with her Skill 1 Shining Edge, and also with HP Plus and Runic. Um, I think her distinguishing factor, or at least when she came out, was her CS50 or her CS50, which is her last. And basically, how you would manipulate that is if you didn't really feel like shaving an enemy, or if you wanted to just like set up some kind of brave battery or whatever that didn't involve shaving, you would just let Celeste get nuked, and then she would heal roughly. I believe she heals 30% of her health per turn. I could
25%
be.
with her EX.
She also has an HP regen attached to her skill 1.
Yeah, so 25% total.
Oh, I see. So pretty much you're just able to manipulate it so that you would get back to 50% health in 2 turns, not including having someone to heal her after she takes damage. So she'll just be safe again and be able to take a lot of nukes. She worked really well in Deuce X and Agrius X as well as Agrius Chaos. She worked well in Deuce Chaos when her X Plus came out, and I used her for a fair amount of content. There was the May raid with Golbaz's CPU. I can't think of any on top of my head, but I'll definitely shout anything. Alpha Node Chaos was actually something very, very, very good for Select. Because you
Well,
just pretty much,
Celeste did have synergy stats in Alpha Node, so.
yeah. In
But yeah,
addition to the synergy stats, she shut down whenever the enemies were going that yellow aura where you can't shave, but you have to shave them. She would pretty much negate any any brave gain so long as they're brave attacking her or HP attacking her to reset their brave to 0, and she'll just be able to take the hit because she has last stand.
right.
She was just really good with that, even though she was synergy and I got to cheat a little bit with her stat, but that was just all great. I also used her for FOD 12
Oh,
just
you
to
actually
take
used her for
nukes.
12. Huh.
She just pretty much able to take nukes and kind of let you ignore people on the. I can't really think of anything else to talk about on top of my head except that ignoring Zac, I would consider Celes to be one of the first offensive tanks, and that it was something that I really enjoyed doing because she would pretty much not have to worry about getting broken. And even if she did get broken, if there was a non-magic attack, she would have Last Stand as a crutch to rely on, and you could just pretty much jump back based on who you have in your party. It's just really easy to deal with stuff with her.
Yeah. Her
I think she's
damage.
just
Okay, go ahead.
oh, I think she's just overall amazing for any fights that's heavy on magic attacks. She could just, I mean, if you purpled her, she could just solo the Deuce LC Cosmos stage. And also there was with the beta far end of dimension, the stage 4 with the eyes that do a lot of AoE brave plus HP attacks. She could also solo that one. I think Safina has a video on that on YouTube. And also I think with her EX plus, the nice thing is that she gets the party magic damage reduction, which is actually huge.
The magic damage reduction is actually from her reworked skill too.
Oh, sure, it's from rework. Oh, that's great.
Yep.
So you don't even have to use ingots to get that.
Yep.
On that note, one super great thing about Runic is assuming that it is a magic attack. If you're getting AoE'd, none of the brave damage would happen to her because she's absorbing it, which means you're taking roughly 2/3 of the damage you normally would take, not including that 20% magic brave reduction.
The magic brave reduction is actually 60%. On that note, on the slides here, I have listed as party magic brave damage taken times 0.4. All the type of brave damage reduction and HP damage reduction, they are multiplicative, so, and they are not additive. So just keep that in mind.
Math is hard.
You are majoring in math. Come on.
I don't do numerics.
Fair enough. Fair enough. And the last thing I want to add about Celes is that with her EX plus, her EX skill becomes one skill to recast. So basically, you use EX, use a skill, and EX back up again. And her EX actually does a ton of damage, and it gives like it's not uncommon to just like cap like 999 times 5, along with a previous dump, and do up to like 60, 70k damage. I should probably correct that real quick. 60 to 70k damage.
I just thought of something stupid. I wonder if
Yeah?
Celeste can solo Diablo. I'm gonna try that.
Okay, sure. Maybe later.
Yes. I'm definitely trying it at some
She
point.
might not have enough like damage output though. Like
I
unless you
think
conserve skill. Oh, but right, you don't have to like spam runic. You just have to just keep it up. That's all. Yeah.
I think I dueled
Okay.
it with her and Ares, but I don't know because Diablos he has the thing the gravy whatever how
Gravija.
you read it
Yeah.
that's it. Yeah, and that's sort of like a low action delay, and then he could
It's
just HP attack you in the next turn, and
it's
then
less
it
low
will.
action delay than it gives the party high action delay, so he moves
I
first.
see. Yeah, and then it will follow up with a single target HP attack. So it's basically 2 HP attacks from the boss continuously. If you don't get a turn in between to heal up, it could be sort of trouble.
YOLO.
But anyways, let's move on to the next thing since like we are kind of taking quite a while. All right, there we go, Basch. He's actually a pretty unique tank in the sense that his mitigations now. He has a buff which redirects all AoE HP damage taken to self only. So if the boss is using a target all HP attack, the attack will hit the entire party, but then all the HP damage is going to be absorbed onto Basch himself, and then Basch himself gets a 60% HP damage reduction. So he just like take it like a champ. He's the only one who's able to do that in game right now. And on top of that, he also has a brave damage reduction. And to deal with like the amount of HP damage that he can take, he has a ton of self heals. Both his skill 2 and EX are self heals. His AA is a self heal, and his HP plus is a self heal. But one weakness is that he doesn't have a lot of skill uses.
It's pretty much a huge chore trying to balance his skill uses. And it can become a problem when you're trying to refresh aggro or trying to refresh his buff so they can take team AoE or HP reduction or aggro.
Yeah, another thing is that he's actually pretty slow in terms of like speed, so sometimes you might need to refresh his buff and then the other buff is falling off and then you need to refresh another buff and then you don't have the time to heal in between or something, or you just don't have the time to taunt in between. It can get pretty hectic if you don't plan ahead with him.
Yeah, he can easily run out of health if you're not able to top up while basically if the enemy's being way too and aggro falls off. Pretty much everything that you said, Xenon. He just kind of like runs out of gas, and sometimes he can get killed. One fun example of that was in Rosa Chaos, where I would be constantly trying to refresh his buffs while trying to heal him and trying to keep him at like above 20k brave, and then he would get broken at 20k brave by one of the antlions, and the other antlion would just be immediately after while Basch is at like 1 health. Keep in mind he has insane HP reduction, and then he'd just get nuked.
HP reduction doesn't matter when you're at 1 health.
Exactly. It's just it's one of the pitfalls I think with his AoE taunt too, is that Rosa Chaos kind of, it didn't really purposely counter him, but it definitely was hard using him there.
Yeah, not to mention his taunt duration is kind of short. I think it's the shortest among all the tanks here.
My main issues with him are just like, first of all, it's hard to keep his buff and to keep his taunt. So sometimes like his buff is still up there, but the enemies are no longer targeting him to use the skill 1 when you like still have 2 turns of buff left. Since it's sort of like a skill with limited use, and he's literally useless once he runs out of the HP damage reduction buff. And another thing is that while he does have brave damage reduction, it's not very useful.
It's not very potent. Like, you still get broken quite easily, like, if you take a lot of damage.
Yeah, and I think the way it calculates is like, when enemy hits you, they can hit you for more than 9999, and then that number is multiplied with the damage reduction. And then if the remaining number is above 9999, it's thresholded to 9999. So even with damage reduction, you can still get hit 9999 per hit. So it doesn't matter when the enemy hits so hard. The brave damage reduction is just like nothing.
Which happens frequently in Rosa Chaos.
But even with all these said, like, we are by no means saying Basch is not a good tank. In fact, like, we only listed 7 tanks. Like, we have 7 tanks, like 7 true main tanks, out of like 125 characters right now. And he is the 3rd EX Plus tank to be released, so he's still pretty useful from the time he was released. It's just that the later tanks are doing the job much better. But still, he's the only one with the AoE HP redirection to Celes, so he can still be useful depending on the fight and depending on the team that you used him with.
On that note, Kesh used him to great effect in Pandemonium Chaos. You're just taking an influx of HP damage every other turn. There's 2 phases to it, but basically the TLDR of it is you're taking AoE HP damage almost every turn, and it's usually extremely potent. And he just kind of eats it up, easy peasy.
Right, because in Synergy, like, he has like, what, 30k HP at least? Actually, let me check. I'll check later.
This is actually an interesting point because he has a CS50 that boosts his HP.
And
so
then
if you want to go
artifacts.
if you want to go for an HP build Basch, you can make him like really super tanky.
Yeah. So that's a pretty fun tank. His damage is no slouch though. He actually gets crit damage up for his skill 2, and his EX actually hits pretty hard at MLB. Just it's a tad slow, and he runs out. That's really like the gist of his our main problems with him. And let's move on to Zach. So I guess I'm taking this one, right? No objections.
Oh, be my guest.
Okay, well, he's probably my favorite character overall. And he's like really powerful. Basically, you can read things for yourself. He's basically so his brave barrier, for those who don't know, generates a barrier worth 150% of his current eye brave, and then it basically just sits there. Any incoming attacks will be reduced by the number of the barrier, but the barrier won't be depleted. So he can. So if he generates 8k barrier, he can take any single hit that's under 8k and not lose any brave. And with the current boards and whatnot, and if you just compare him with an eye brave aura, he can pretty much just get to a 9999 barrier and just never take brave damage ever. So that's pretty good. Unless he gets broken, then the shield is depleted. But he doesn't really get broken because nothing can break him unless it's a mechanic that just guarantees break. And on top of that, his damage is absolutely insane. Like I think.
I'm gonna butt in.
Mm-hmm.
I was super duper upset when Zach came out in the Cosmos era, or right before the Cosmos era,
Yeah.
because you just basically made look like she was hitting for pillows. That is gonna lead to what Xenon's about to say. Sorry
Right.
for the brief interruption.
Basically, like his damage is already good. On his EX plus, he gets a 80% attack buff. That's like more than most actual attackers. And then his EX plus hits super hard. The extra attack buff makes his actual skills hit a lot harder too. So, and then he also recently got his character board, which pumps up his damage by another huge chunk. So I think he's actually, if not top 5, at least like top 10 damage dealer in game while being a very good tank. Okay, what else? He has a pretty good aura. 40 plus 40% X Brave and attack. His regen keeps himself up pretty well, and his EX plus gives him a 20% HP drain. He doesn't really have to be worrying about like taunt durations and whatnot because his EX is AoE and taunt's AoE, and he can also use Brave Plus to taunt as well. I think he's the only tank with a taunting Brave Plus, right?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I'm you're right.
And as for longevity, if you have his character board, his HP plus becomes insane. Basically, he gains up to like 20k brave, deals like 60k HP damage, and then gets 20k brave back. It's honestly absurd. I think who here actually soloed Leviathan Ultimate Chaos with him, right?
Oh, that's after he gets his character
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But that just goes to show like how absurd he can be.
Yeah, it's basically because after the character board, his HP plus plus just becomes insane. Like you do 50k HP damage and you get like 20k brave back, and that improved his longevity greatly. And you're basically just using the skills for buff upkeep. So I think before his character board, at least I wasn't able to do that. But after the character board, he doesn't even need a support chart to help him solo Leviathan. Yeah.
The only downside to Zac is that he has 4 buff slots for himself, and they are all pretty important buffs. So one of them is 100% max brave buff, and the other are their speed, his like action delay down buff that makes him faster, and his Brave Barrier and his regen. So if he gets debuffed, he's not gonna be very happy about it. I was kind of expecting when he's getting his EX Plus to get a debuff evasion built into his Brave Barrier, but that didn't happen. So you just kind of have to be careful about where to bring him in. Anyways, I think I have rambled on for long enough here. Let's move
You
on.
can always just run Zac with Lana, because
True.
Lana also boosts initial brave,
Yeah.
and that's also what like Zac needs.
Yeah. Alright, let's move on to the next character then. Come on. Not this. Here we go. Edge. So I think this one's yours, Marco.
Yeah, I think I'm probably the only one who used Edge somewhat extensively. Well, I only used him extensively after his release, up until Galuf's release. I think Edge was in a pretty weird spot before he gets his EX plus. But after his EX plus, I think he can definitely be categorized as a tank. So he has like emergency taunting on his skill 2, which gives himself evasion. And also he has party 2-turn evasion on his EX buff. I think people use Edge mostly for the 2-turn evasion. And because it's a buff that can be extended, you can pair him with like Hope or Yuna or Echo, or you can pair him with Selfie for faster EX recast.
Or both.
In that case, yeah. In that case, you can have a party that's like invincible for the whole fight. I think too, Edge is like, he's not like super broken or anything. He's pretty much balanced because he has low overflow on his skills. Both his skill 1 and skill 2 only have 120 overflow. And another thing is that he is a ninja, so he's like super fast. Even after you remove all his speed passives, he's still so fast. So he has like 2-turn party evasion buff on his EX, but if you're not careful, if like you do not check turn order when using his skill, the boss might not get to act before he runs out of those buffs. So he's a character when I need to constantly press down the button to see where his next turn is to decide when to use him. But overall, I think he's like, when his gimmick works, it's really helpful. But if it doesn't work, like in cases where the enemy has an attack that's guaranteed, there's not too much meaning in bringing him because his damage is somewhat low compared with like what Zac can offer you.
I mean, it's kind of unfair to compare any other tank to Zac in terms of damage. It's unfair to compare like most damage dealer to Zac even. But speaking of the Edge, I actually maxed him pretty recently, even though I pulled him back when he came out. I kind of just let him sit on the bench. I maxed him kind of recently to just try to use him in FEOD 12. But for the teams I used with him for FEOD 12, they couldn't do enough damage. So that's one of my main gripes with Edge. It's like he's his tanking is not entirely reliable unless you actually bring a buff extender or selfie for the faster EX recast, but his damage is not reliable enough to justify for that kind of unreliability. So in terms of Zac, like I just said I'm not gonna compare him to Zac, but now I am excusing for that. In terms of Zac has no tools of dealing with AoE damage at all. So like if the party takes AoE Brave plus HP, they're gonna take full damage on that. There's nothing Zac can do about it. But in exchange for that, his damage is really high. And I think for the amount of like unreliability that Edge has without the extra helper, his damage is not good enough. And there's the other thing too. Is like when you already need an external buffer to make Edge more reliable, it kind of defeats the purpose of bringing Edge in my book. So I don't really feel that good about him. But then again, I was using him in more recent content after he was released, so that might not be the prime content environment for him.
Yeah, I think like when he was released, his damage, well, and at that time like Rosa was like the main golden support where everybody uses. If you pair Edge with Rosa, his EX can do like 99999 with 50% splash, which was pretty good at that time. Until right now, we have Cypher who does like 9999 times 2 with 50% splash. And also, like Rosa has a 20% overflow buff, which somewhat helps with Edge's skill 1 and skill 2 low overflow. I think he mostly helps with AoE attacks, even if when his EX is not up, you can do his skill 2 because he will evade the attack. And his skill 2 also gives the party battery, which means the party members will not get broken. So even if it's you're still going to take some damage, but it's generally enough to make you survive. But he's not a tank where who doesn't like rely on the healer. You would probably still want to bring the healer with him.
Yeah, especially the fact that he has no self heal, so if you mess up and he takes damage, and that's it.
Oh yeah, actually he also doesn't have last stand. Not that he needs it.
No, he's either like
Yeah.
evade or die.
Yeah. And I think some people would try to do like funny things with him, like pair him with Aid or pair him with Shadow. So, because those are
Everyone
characters
dodges.
who, yeah, who counter evasion. So, so their countering can somewhat make up for Edge slow damage.
Yeah, and Edge also has a 50% attack aura. Well, pretty much every other tank has like 50% attack aura, so he can help them quite a bit too. The only tank that doesn't have a good attack aura is actually Celes. She's only 40% max rate if you have her EX plus. Anyways, speaking of evasion, let's talk about the true evasion tank, Galuf, or Galuf. How do you even pronounce his name? Marco, go ahead.
Oh, I call him Galuf, but I have no idea what is the correct way to pronounce it. I think Galuf is like closer to the Japanese pronunciation. Well, but whatever. So yeah, I use him a lot, a lot, a lot. Like ever since I got him, he's basically on every team for every fight I have. I also used him like in the 50-50 era back in global to deal with early EX fights. I think back then he was a character who has a niche of evading and countering physical attacks, and he was like a god when the enemy does all physical attacks. I think back then in global when there was the Sephiroth EX fight where Sephiroth just tries to pierce you with his sword, Golov was like the right solution back then because all the there's also I think the mannequin that's also does like physical attack. So he basically just nuked that fight. And later on, well, I don't know if people know about the JP YouTuber. I think he's called like Sejin, and he tries to use Golov in like Cosmos and Chaos content. And before he gets his EX plus weapon for Cosmos or Chaos level content, he has the issue like his damage is definitely lacking, and also he has no way of dealing with magic attacks. And also while he has a last stand, he doesn't really have healing. So sometimes when he takes a fatal attack, he just won't be able to recover. And luckily, his EX weapon just fixed all of these things for him. It gives him, I think it's 70. Oh, it's a 60% evasion for all attacks. So even if there's magic attack, he would still be able to evade the attack, which just makes him from a niche character into a more general purpose tank that can be used for a lot of contents. And I personally prefer him to other tanks because the fact that he evades attack means he won't get debuffed by whatever debuff the enemy throws at you. And there are also those annoying enemies who would try to delay you or push you back. When you evade those attacks, the delaying also doesn't happen. And also different from the other tanks, he covers his teammate instead of taunting the enemy. So you don't need to worry about things like enemy clearing their own debuffs or the enemy acts too fast or like the enemy is immune to debuff. Like when we talk about Basch, one of his main drawback is his tongue doesn't last long enough, and that's not an issue for Golov. I think he isn't he has these like advantages or these strong points as a tank, and his shortcomings would be that he doesn't do too much damage. He doesn't have like extremely high potency on his skills, and his cover is basically a party battery without dumping. But however, he does have the counter on enemy turns, which I think somewhat makes up for his damage. So he's pretty much very viable for chaos content, and you can just pair him with somebody who's good at dealing damage. And I think I also tried like doing some dual contents with him, and he was just pretty good. He just allows you to ignore whatever the enemy is going to do. And another sort of funny thing was that I was trying to do a 2-man run for Ifrit Chaos, and I started with I think Aries and Celes, because most of what Ifrit does is magic attacks. But however, Ifrit gets his brave regen, and then he just HP attack you and then self battery back to that brave value, and Celes is just not able to handle that. But however, Golov, even if it's just like 70% chance to evading that attack, he evaded it most of the time and actually making that a successful run. So it's kind of an interesting thing.
One thing I would totally like to add is that it's going to be a misnomer, but I would like to call his counters kind of like a free skill or free turn, where he's just throwing HP. And you can kind of rebound it off of stuff like his cover rather than its batteries. Also works pretty well with Krill's X battery, where it preemptively batteries after every turn based on damage. I can't think of anything else, but on the note of duos, I did something pretty silly with X-Death and Galuf, as I pronounce it, and Brothers Chaos, and I managed to get a full complete with it. Mostly just because Galuf is just sitting there countering every single, while X-Death just has 100% uptime on poison.
I'm the only one who did not pull for him here. Like, it's not that I didn't try, but I got Leo, so I kind of just stopped. So sometimes it's like when we're just discussing things, it's like Marco just use Galuf. I didn't pull for him
All the time.
all the time.
All the time.
But I must say, yeah, Galuf is a really good all-purpose tank, even against magic damage, because he can just evade with 60% chance, and when you pair him with like Shiva and Ramu board evasion, so it goes up to I think like 70%, or I'm not sure. Actually, we are not sure if the evasion stacks additively or multiplicatively. My words, multiplicatively. But it's still pretty good chance of evasion. And the other thing is that even though Galib has like low potency overall, he has the highest attack aura out of all tanks, 70%. Well, 30% of that actually comes from his cover buff, but that's just a unique buff that can be pushed up anyways. And he has a plus 60% generic and brave buff when he covers people as well, so he can actually be a pretty good enabler on top of being a pretty good tank. The only downside I would say is like if you use him, it's not very interactive. You just put up the cover and put up the dodge, and you just like let him sit, and he just kills things.
His X is super duper pro though. He just pulls out 2 swords and then he just does 99999. But that's just me.
Okay. Alright then, let's move to the last tank of the list, Snow. I think only I have Snow here, right? Or
I have him, but I only used him for 1 fight, and I don't. I
okay.
never really took the initiative to look at what he does.
Okay, so Snow is actually pretty almost broken. What he does is like his tanking style is basically after 5 turns of taking damage, he just takes no damage out anymore. So after 5 turns after using skill 1, when he gets hit 5 times. So the first time he uses skill 1, it reduces incoming brave damage by 50%, and after every subsequent time he gets hit, it reduces the damage by a further 10%. So after 5 hits, he reduces all incoming brave damage to 0, like no exceptions. The only other person who can do that is Zack with an Eye Brave Aura to generate a large amount of shield, but Snow just gets that and it just stays there. It doesn't fall off unless you let it fall off. When you refresh it, the effect still stays the same. And on top of that, his EX actually gives the party HP damage reduction buff. Though it's not really high potency, it's only a 20% mitigation, which means like all damage taken is reduced becomes 0.8 multiplier. It actually makes quite a bit of difference. In terms of 30k AoE HP attack, which would normally do around like 10k to each member, it brings it down to like 8k, which is actually much more manageable. Despite like it might not really like seem like much on paper, but when you actually take the damage, it feels like a lot. Especially like when you have to activate like HP based passives and whatnot. His taunt is AoE 5 turns, and it's also AoE 5 turns on his EX. His EX is also really good. His EX is a huge AoE Brave plus HP with an 80% splash. So you can see him hit like 80k splash on other targets as well, and actually it recasts pretty quickly too. But I actually think he's quite balanced. So I actually made a few videos comparing him with Zack, along with actual pastebin thing to go with it. So basically, the short version is that Snow is better at tanking for the party, but in return, his damage is slightly lower. Zack has higher damage, but he's also slightly more restrictive in what content he can be used. So because Zack's EX is magic, some fights that resist magic he's not very good at because a lot of his damage comes from EX, but Snow can be used in a lot more places. The only restriction being his skill 2 being ice-based attack, so enemies can resist or absorb that. But even then, it's not too much of trouble because his damage actually doesn't come from his skill 2. His skill 2 has like really bad overflow, it's only like 120%. It's mostly used as self heal and the EX ability charge tool, so he doesn't really lose that much, and he does not rely on having a taunt either, because his HP damage reduction buff is basically always active with his EX. So he's fairly balanced in that case, and he becomes my go-to tank when I'm not using Zack. So, Sugoi, which fight did you put Snow in and never used him again?
I used him in FEOD 1. Basically, I used his brave reduction thing to just not do anything on the last wave with I believe I forgot what the bosses were, but he basically just kind of steamrolled it, and I didn't have to do anything.
You put him in FEOD 1. That's kind of a waste to me.
I mean, I have him at base, or I have him either at base X or at +1 or +0.
Okay. True. And yeah, he also has a pretty good aura to go with it.
But I'm either thinking of putting him at 1 or at 7. But right now my 15 CP Warrior Blights and so I don't I want to take out Selfie, but anyways, I used Snow at 1, and he worked really well there. He had pretty good, not amazing damage, but he had pretty good consistent damage. And
yeah.
He tanked he tanked extremely. Oh, I can't think of the right words, but he tanked solidly.
Well, he is ice attributed after all. Okay, bad joke, bad pun. Let's move on. So that's the 7 tanks covered. What do you want to talk about next? So we actually have this discussion topic here. I think we cover most of these points, right? Um, in short, why are tanks good?
Why are tanks? I'm just. Why are tanks good? You said.
Yeah, sorry about that. Oh yes, why are tanks good?
Basically, if you're ever in a fight that needs some form of mitigation, or just something to just take a hit and go and let stand, you're gonna definitely 100% need one. One current example of this is Keys Chaos, where um, I can't explain it too well, but basically the scorpions will kind of follow each other in turns, so it would kind of be in an A-B format, but A would go right after B, but it wouldn't show it until it's like, all right, I'm gonna do this mechanic now, and the scorpion that was originally gonna attack someone is gonna brave gain the other scorpion to like 20 to just one-shot someone, and having a tank there just made life easier. I can't think of any others on top of my head except for um I will pass the topic and think about it for a second.
I would say tanks generally just makes fights bring that, because you a lot of the time they allow you to not worry too much about the enemy mechanism, not to worry about getting broken, and it would just allow the other members on your team to like freely dump their brave and do attack. I think the thing right now that's different from before is that before it's okay if you get broken, you can just like shave it back, or enemies just doesn't hit that hard. So but right now in chaos level, the enemies they have much higher attack and also much faster speed. So when they break you, they can just gain, or sometimes even when they don't break you, they can just gain a huge amount of brave that could sometimes be hard to shave down. And because of how fast they are, like if they are at a high brave and the only one you have there that's going to act is like a healer who doesn't really do that much damage, it could cause a lot of problem for you. And having the tank there, especially when a lot of the tanks have a last stand, you don't really have to worry about that. Even if you get broken by an AoE attack, you can just have the tank that HP attack and stay at 1 HP and just heal back up slowly. So it just makes fights a lot easier.
Right. The other thing is that before, tanks kind of sacrifice a lot of their offensive ability to actually be a tank. But right now, the a lot of tanks actually like they can push out a pretty good amount of damage on top of being a tank, and most of them actually have a pretty good amount of aura as well. So in the purely gameplay perspective, like there is no reason not to bring a tank, because like if you bring another pure DPS along instead of the tank, like you're bringing another pure DPS, alright, but you're actually losing a bit of aura, and the difference between a top tier DPS and the average tank, other than maybe Warrior of Light, the damage difference is not that significant, at least according to me. And there you also have the anomaly of Zac, who's basically a top tier DPS himself.
Yeah,
um,
even when I was talking about how Celes had pretty good damage, she did not do as much as a damage as a generic damage dealer. Especially when she first came out, she had to deal with using runic without a HP dump. So when you would do that, you would just pretty much have a turn of her doing nothing. It'd just be worse if she would get like 20k brave immediately after that. And so whenever you would bring a tank, you would usually consider not having a healer, because the tank would be just taking all the damage, and they'd be able to mitigate it some way, shape, or form.
but right now, Celes is actually doing pretty good damage herself too. So that's sort of the difference right now. So that's why tanks are generally considered pretty good. So, which brings us to the next little bit of discussion topic. Like, do you actually need tanks? Like, I know right now, Sugoi, you're trying to do a lot of fights without bringing tanks, so how do you feel about that?
It depends entirely on the fight. Like with Keys Chaos, as I was talking about the Scorpions, I use Yuffie, Selfie, and Kamari, or just basically try to alternate blind and Yuffie's no cheating buff to just mitigate any possible incoming HP damage. Or, but basically what would happen is it would run out of buffs even though I'm using Selfie. But instead the Scorpion would just run out of the debuffs, and then it would just like one shot someone. Whereas a tank would just get one shot, but be in last stand, and everything would be alright.
Yeah, specifically about Kai's Chaos, the enemies, uh, they have a way to. So the mechanic that they do is that they link up, and then they cannot be delayed by breaks. So they will just batter each other and do HP attack. The way you dispel that is by initiating a chase on them, so that takes them out of their stance, and then you can break them and like move on with the fight. But when they bring in a tank, like you can just like eat the attack last stand because they don't do 2 HP attacks one after another, and then just heal back up and completely ignoring that mechanic. Like when I first did the fight, like I didn't actually feel like I need to do something special. Like even though they actually get the brave damage reduction when they link up and prepare for the HP attack, like I don't even feel the need to shave that 20k brave with a tank because I can just eat it and then just keep doing damage on the other one.
I think tanks are good, but if we're like talking about need, as like if they're a necessity, they're I think they're not, especially now that we have a lot of characters that do a lot of fancy things. I know, like for like Nicole, he's been using Cipher together with Freya to deal with or like the tanking needs, because Cypher's EX debuff could just nullify Brave damage for a turn, and Freya just gives party last stand, and she also has healing, so sort of like everyone becomes a tank. Everyone can just take a fatal attack and then just like slowly heal up.
That's kind of true. Are there any fights that are especially unfriendly to tanks that you guys can think of?
I was talking a little bit about Rosa Chaos. If your name is not Zach or kind of Warrior of Light, I know some people wiped
Warrior of Light's
Rosa
shield
Warrior
can
of
get
Light.
quite easily broken by the beetles though.
Yeah, they after like at a certain threshold they easily deal 9. They usually deal 27,000.
Yeah. But if you actually have like I think Galuf completely neuters them and Snow probably can too. Edge probably does too, right? The only fight that, for me personally, that I had a little bit trouble using tanks on was the Siaran event Chaos. So for that Chaos, the bosses are Humbaba reskins, and they have this special attack where they deal HP damage based on the party's entire HP. So kind of like the Iron Worms, but they do it quite frequently. And after that, they have a lot of like self brave gains into HP attacks. So it can get frequent enough to the point that a single tank may not even have enough health to heal back up before they get their next turn. I struggled a bit with that using a solo Zac. Then I just deal with it by bringing Celes. So I got 2 tanks to deal with 2 bosses, and that worked out okay in the end. But that's the only fight that I can think of that's particularly unfriendly towards tanks.
I think the devs are sometimes like trying to counter tanks For example, the friend LC, where the boss, where they will just have an attack that will just break you for sure. So
Yeah,
it's super unfriendly for Zack, and also because of his EX shield just gets dispelled when he's broken, and it's also quite unfriendly for Celes because that attack is a magic attack. So there are two bosses. The first boss breaks her, and the second boss would first attack her to give her brave, and then break her again. So the enemy actually gains like twice the break bonus, which is sort of hilarious. But
not
if
to
your tank,
mention, okay, not to
oh yeah, go
mention
ahead.
that by taking that many breaks, it takes a hit on your score as well.
Yeah, that I mean the taking breaks part, it just can't be avoided. I think a lot of the times it's like they are trying to make you not able to just cheese content with tank. But in these occasions, tanks are still like a very good
They're still
way.
good, yeah.
Yeah, it's still better than just going in with other chars and like pray to RNG to not die.
Yeah, and speaking of other characters, let's just briefly mention some other alternatives to using tanks. If you're adamant on not using tanks for some reason. So we mentioned earlier, Nico Berry. I think his YouTube is like Tom Bear Jr. or something. He is specifically using Cypher and Freya in conjunction, so basically, everyone gets a last stand, and then Cypher's EX can basically nullify one attack completely.
Um,
On,
go on.
okay, another method that you can use is to just build an evasion team with 8 and Shadow. If you can, if you can manage to like manipulate enemy AI, so if say the enemy always targets the highest health or lowest health or something like that, you can use 8 to great effect. Shadow as well. Shadow has like a constant 60% dodge rate that can be increased with his summon board passives, and his cant is pretty strong too.
On on a note of that, I liked using Kamari in conjunction with some attack debuffer, like during the challenge event, this current challenge event with
Mission Dungeon?
yeah, with the quote unquote twins chimeras and uh the other stuff. That doesn't matter. But it's mostly the chimeras that were a huge problem. And basically I paired Kamari with Varys and Ramza, and I would stack attack buffs or debuffs alongside Kamari's defense aura. And it's just basically with my original party where they would break from like 20 to 30k break. The AoE would do probably at most 3000 brave damage, including single target attacks. So basically, you can kind of cheese stuff like that if you can make it happen via debuffs, debuff resistance, and other things. And also, Kamari has blind. I used him for Pandemonium Chaos, and basically, whenever I was gonna get hit by, I would use his AoE either on the big nuke or on the tornadoes, so the tornadoes would miss alongside the single target brave plus HP or the single target battery HP attack the boss does after his AoE. So that's cool. And he also has 20% HP reduction for the party.
And lastly, just to mention that this list is no means exhaustive. Like it's just like whatever just came up to the top of our heads. So for example, like things that are not on this list, like you can use, say, some powerful debuffers, as Sugar already mentioned, to just like mitigate a lot of damage. And of course, alternative to using tanks, you can, if the attacks are not immediately lethal, you can always heal back up with healers. And Porum's HP damage reduction is also another choice too.
I think right now with some of the newer characters, you can just have the HP silence from Celia, and you can actually just pair her with characters that delay the enemy, like pair her with Leo and Wayne, and just time when the enemies are going to do an HP attack, and then you just silence them, and then you just start delaying them, and it's you just sort of like it's sort of like cheating, but in this way you sort of just don't need to worry about taking damage
or anything at all. Because like when the enemy is silenced, like they are basically doing nothing and they just become a striking dummy.
The best part is when they go on a loop, when they're trying to do an HP attack, and you can just keep that loop going, and they won't do anything. Because they'll keep on trying to HP attack, but they'll be silenced
Yep.
and silenced for 12 turns. And then if you're using Leo and Vayne or some other turn delayers to just kind of turn delay them in conjunction with Arcelia's HP, just stupid things happen.
Which is why we think with the next tier might be coming and we can no longer cheat stuff like that. It's slightly scary.
That's it. It was a horrible moment when my entire roster was counting like the so-called best DPS dealing like 1,000 damage, 3-digit number.
Yeah, when transitioning from Cosmos Chaos. I'm not looking forward to the next one.
It's gonna be
Anyways,
fun.
on that note, do we have anything else you'd love to say?
that's pretty much all from me.
Yeah, we have been going for an hour and 5 minutes. Surprise, well, we said the episodes are gonna be like 15, 20 minutes tops. Our first episode went on for 30 minutes, and now we just double that. Anyways, thanks for listening, I suppose. This will be the end of this episode. I hope, if anyone's still staying, that we didn't bore you to death. We have a little bit of like audio technical difficulties with Sugoi's roommates, so hopefully that wasn't too disruptive. And we are going to end the episode here.